right. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. I appreciate you all taking the time out to join us today. We look forward to today's session. I'm Anne-Marie Fernandez. I'm a Senior Technical Product Marketing Manager. I'm based out of Danville, California, and I will be moderating today's session. So session is going to be the first of 4 sessions to talk about foundational type topics. We've got also a couple webinars. We've got a ton of webinars, but complementary to these foundational sessions, we'll have quarterly. We also have a monthly session from Blurda, Likaj, and EMEA that's going to be talking some more of the cutting edge, really cool stuff. So look out for those. And Aisha will be sending out the link on how to register for them. The first question, the first thing that we're going to cover today is, do I need a mature CMDB to implement IRM on ServiceNow? This is kind of a common question we get from customers. So we are going to try to answer this question for you today. And today I have Matt Porwal, who will be introducing himself.
Yeah, thanks, Anne-Marie. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody joining from around the globe. My name is Matt Porwal. I'm a principal business process consultant as part of ServiceNow's professional service organization that we refer to as Expert Services. I've been on the Now I'm based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I've been working on the Now platform since the Kingston release, and have been with ServiceNow for about 2 years. Really excited for today's topic.
Awesome. All right, so we've got a couple housekeeping things before we get started. So we've saved time at the end for some Q&A, but during the session, feel free to ask questions along the way. Be sure to use the Q&A button versus the chat, just because then if we don't get to your question, we can more readily grab that the questions and answer them. So next week, we'll be having a follow-up office hours, and we can take those questions and answer them there, and also share them on the community. So this presentation is being recorded and will be shared on the ServiceNow community. And also after the event, we will be sending out a survey. We would appreciate your feedback so we can aim to get better every single time. And next is a little plug.
Yeah, thanks, Anne-Marie. So part of why I am so excited to be here today is that in addition to discussing with you all the confluence of IRM and the CMDB, I also have the privilege of representing ServiceNow's Risk and Resilience Expert Services team. And if you don't know who we are, we're a group of highly skilled technical and business process experts that can help solve any and all implementation challenges that you might be considering. We are uniquely positioned in that we have expertise across all of the ServiceNow IRM domains, meaning that while today we're going to be talking about a lot of the core functions of integrated risk management, we also, for example, have key resources and experts in the privacy, ESG, and business continuity domains. And so my call to action for all of you today is, if you like what you hear and you want to learn more, I'd encourage you to either connect with me on LinkedIn or reach out to your local account team that is supporting you from a ServiceNow perspective. Awesome. Thanks so much, Anne-Marie.
All right. So before we get started, just to get to know you all a little bit better, we've got 2 polls to kick things off. The first thing is to just best describe your CMDB implementation level today. Sorry, is it ad hoc, meaning no governance, or none at all? And this is your CMDB, not your IRM. The second question is going to be around IRM. So ad hoc, developing, your CMDB has some governance around it. It's used operationally, maybe an incident, problem, or change, or it's got a defined governance and configuration management process, and you've got the services defined as well with some auto data population. And then sort of the highest level is you've got governance and strategy executed around your CMDB implementation, and services defined, and automated data is coming in and flowing in. Awesome. All right. So looks like we've got a lot of folks answering. I think that, let's see if there's any more folks submitting. Can you see the results, Matt? No.
Yep.
Not yet. Oh, you can see it. Okay, good. All right, good. Okay, so it looks like we've kind of got like a little bell curve going with a lot of folks with a defined governance and configuration management process. So that's awesome. Let's go ahead and launch the next poll. This one is around your IRM implementation. Oops, sorry. All right, so describe your IRM implementation today or integrated risk management. One, are you thinking about purchasing ServiceNow integrated risk management? Are you licensed but undeployed and maybe there's just low usage? Or maybe you actually have it with several products, but maybe it's just inconsistent deployment. And then the last is licensed, completely completed your initial deployment with expected usage. All right, so it looks like we've got a lot of folks that are in the licensed and deployment, with a good amount of folks also in the 1st and 2 levels, which is good. This is the, we were hoping that we would get a lot of folks in that area. We'll give a couple seconds to then go ahead and get started. Or give people a couple minutes to finish the poll. All right. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, good, good. Thanks for answering those poll questions. So today's agenda, we've got really simple agenda. We're going to answer 3 questions. 1, what does the CMDB have to do with IRM anyway? Then our main topic for today is, do I need a mature CMDB to implement IRM on ServiceNow? And then we've got kind of a fun question at the end where we're going to put Matt on the spot and ask him, if you were a director and just purchased ServiceNow, where would you start? And then Matt's going to do a quick demo. All right, so here we go. So the first question, Matt, so what does IRM have to do with the CMDB anyway?
Yeah. So this is a common question or inquiry that we get early on in conversations we're having with customers that are considering implementing ServiceNow IRM. And so the way that I like to think about this is that ServiceNow IRM is unique in that we grew up as a product alongside the core strengths of the Now platform, meaning at the center of how we think about, measure, and assess risk and compliance in the litany of things within IRM's capabilities are that assets, services, and business-based risk and compliance is central to our data model. And that's, a good opportunity to introduce this idea of the ServiceNow Common Services Data Model, the CSDM. And we are going to talk a bit more about that later, as was mentioned during the agenda. But what this means in practical terms, if you're somebody who is new to ServiceNow or are considering ServiceNow, is that our IRM solution is designed to operate as part of your ecosystem of known data points within the ServiceNow environment. And that, more excitedly, if you know what's most important to you and you know where your known data points are, you're well on your way to better protecting that which is most important to you and your business by leveraging IRM as a solution. So that's where I like to, that's really where I like to think about this is CMDB is going to inform where your data, what data you have. IRM is going to help to inform what you need to be protecting, what you need to be measuring, and what you need to be taking action on. And those 2 things are designed to interact and mesh really well together, which I do believe we are rather uniquely positioned in the IRM market to help customers achieve that both in rapid value, but also in a way that allows for scalability into the future.
Awesome. All right, so you ready for the next question?
Absolutely.
All right, so can we talk a little bit more about why we're all here, which is, do I need a mature CMDB to implement ServiceNow? Well, I kind of gave the answer there, sorry.
No problem. One of the big things that I say is you don't need a mature CMDB to implement ServiceNow IRM. What you do need to know is what data is being used to inform decision-making and ensuring that that data is accurate and relevant. So that isn't to say that everything needs to be included, but those areas that you're going to be focusing on, emphasizing on, the areas that are driving key either non-compliance, key risks, so on and so forth, you want to have good data that you're making decisions on. And as I think was pretty well represented during the poll question earlier, many customers tend to sort of see themselves at differing levels of that journey. And so rather than trying to tell you sort of a one-size-fits-all approach to solving the challenges of your CMDB, I like to think of this more so from the concept of starting with what's most important. So as an example, your critical business applications, your critical business services, or those things that are really going to be most impacting as far as your ability to operate your business, to interact with your customers, so on and so forth. And so from there, consider what your key business drivers are. So first you're defining, right, what are my key business processes? What are my key critical business applications? Now think about what's driving those. So do you operate in a heavily regulated industry? If, for example, financial services or other areas such as that, med tech, so forth, consider beginning with a framework-driven compliance program. So look at, NIST, cybersecurity framework, the Center for Internet Security. We've got a number of different regulatory-driven frameworks that you can start with, where you can then begin to marry those together. But let's take another example. So are you the type of organization that's operating in an environment where risk-informed decision-making is going to be key to sustaining and or growing your business, right? So thinking about the stock market, maybe an easy way to think of this is you've got your growth stocks and you got your value stocks, right? So maybe you're the type of company that making informed risk decision-making is going to be crucial to you out competing. It's going to be crucial to you holding off competitors, so on and so forth. And if that's the case, then you might consider going with more of like a programmatic risk identification and assessment process as a starting point. However, the good news is regardless of where you choose to start, you can breathe easier knowing that ServiceNow underlying all of this is supported by robust workflow from an end-to-end perspective and a data model that's designed to grow with you and mature as you mature. That way you're positioned uniquely to be in a position where you can start with what's important, but so long as you continue to sort of work within the guide rails that we've helped to set up within the common services data model, you can also feel comfortable knowing that over time, you're not going to run into upgradability challenges. You're not going to outgrow your solution as you continue to mature. And really, you're going to chart a path where your investment might be incremental, but your maturity and your scalability is really going to start to look more, logarithmic, right? It's going to accelerate that much more quickly.
Yeah, and there's kind of a new thing called CSDM, the Common Services Data Model. Matt, do you think people get confused between CSDM and CMDB? And do you want to maybe flesh it out a little bit for folks?
Yeah, so I think of CSDM, and I'm going to have maybe use my analogy more than once here, but I like to think in analogous terms. So think of ServiceNow as a platform, as your coloring book, right? In CSDM, they're going to be the lines on the page, so telling you where to color within. CMDB and IRM are really sort of they're the colored pencils that are going to help you to draw your masterpiece out of this, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea, and I'll bring it back to the depiction we have up on the screen here, is CMDB is a process that drives, accountable ownership and governance and so on related to the management of your IT assets, your business services, your business applications, all of the different things that you're going to see in this lower sort of chunked out area. CSDM is saying, we know that CMDB is vitally important to the ServiceNow platform, and here's how it can fit in with everything else that we offer as far as an integrated solution is concerned.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Matt. And also to clarify, a lot of folks think CMDB is that orange infrastructure data, but CSDM includes the foundational data as well, right? So everything in the green. So the key thing is for risk, which is this lot of colors on the top, is really we take that data from the foundational CSDM and then bring it into IRM. But what you're saying is bring in what matters most, right? And you've got the guardrails of CSDM to make sure you don't get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to grossly oversimplify IRM, if I may, in effect, what you have are information objects that you want to measure. Those could be office locations, those could be data centers, those could be people, those could be processes. Those information objects are then measured against a set of criteria. That criteria can be risk derived. So what are the things that are drivers of my risk? Those can be compliance derived. What are my internal policies or external regulations? But at the end of the day, really, ServiceNow ServiceNow IRM is built on this concept of basically templatizing everything that's required to get you to what do I want to measure and how do I want to measure it? And CSDM, I think of as a process that's going to keep you on track. And we talk a lot in the ServiceNow world about, out of the box versus configuration versus customization. And that doesn't totally alleviate that conversation. But what I can tell you is from an underlying data management and data quality consideration, you're going to keep yourself very much on the straight and narrow, and you're going to grow as the platform grows. And I think, the customers I see being most successful in their use are the ones where when changes happen, they're readily able to embrace those changes and kind of lean into the new functionality, versus those customers who kind of see ServiceNow as, it can do anything, so build it as anything. And now it's started to see more as like a threat of when new opportunities come in rather than an opportunity.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So in a way, people like to think of it as maybe a platform on top of the platform. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great way of thinking about it. And it's a platform on top of a platform that can talk to the other platforms too. And that's really where that's where we get into the so much value can be derived of identify the information that's most important to you one time and use it throughout your environment. And IRM is a spoke from that, but there's going to be that you're going to learn as you mature your processes, other value plays that you can start to use that data to drive more accountability, whether that's, one of the good examples, and I don't mean to get too tangential here, but another area where we commonly see organizations mature from sort of where they're at to where they want to be is to say, well, now that I kind of understand what's most important to me, I'm measuring it and I'm working on it. Now, how do I put a sustainable program in place to assist with that? Well, I can tell you that from something like a APM, application portfolio management, there's a natural synergy that can happen there where, as your next thing, now that I've measured and I have an understanding of that, which is most important, now I can start to look at what's also emerging. And am I staying ahead of the trends or am I falling behind, and and how do I need to course correct so that we can continue to optimize rather than sort of claim victory and then stagnate from there on out.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. One of the things that we also wanted to show you all is this is the new view of the operational resilience dashboard in Utah is available. And this is what it looks like. So essentially think of operational resilience as more of a dashboard, but there's a lot of architecture behind it too that we wanted to show you all today. So again, this is the new UI, but if you look at it in the old UI or the UI 16, This is really just a service record called retail payments, for example. The record above this will look like a typical CMDB record where you've got your dependencies. The one thing that we wanted to show you here is for the service, if you bring in your parent services, child services, or your processes, either from doing a BIA or from your CMDB, what operational resilience will do is take this data based on your services and create the dependencies and put them into pillars. So you'll see we've got facilities, suppliers, technology, and then there's other pillars as well. So it starts to classify these dependencies, right? So the services depends on not just IT, but suppliers as well. So all these dependencies get brought in from your services and child services. And then once all the assets, every asset gets brought in, then it relates all the operational data. So like your incidents, your change requests, your issues, any risks, vulnerabilities, all that kind of gets tied together. And you can see it from the operational resilience workspace here. So this sort of red dotted line boxes out what we call red flags, or think of it as indicators of instability. So if there's a lot of incidents happening, outages, all that data sort of coalesces onto this workspace, and we can start to see like something's going on with this service. So this is a really powerful way how the CMDB really will support your services structure. And again, the BIA is another good sort of quick and easy way to get started. So if you know your critical services, use the BIA, and that will bring at least this data in to get started. All right. Anything you want to add to that, Matt?
Nothing specifically around features, but I think, just to sort of drive my point home previously about seeing new releases as an opportunity rather than a threat. What's going on with OpsRes is a really interesting and unique opportunity to start to bring together the various parts of ServiceNow IRM, right? Because there's a risk component, there's a policy and compliance component, there's even a business continuity component, and being able to embrace those, right, through staying aligned with our data model, staying aligned with intended functionality, is going to put you as a customer in a place where you can take advantage of these quickly and effectively. And so, I would just sort of use this to serve as a reminder of, if you like what you see here and you think that this is cool, more cool stuff is just going to continue to come out, and the better position you are, the easier it's going to be to continue to consume the new features and functionality that's coming out as we mature the product further.
Awesome. Yes. And use the coloring book, right? Use CSDM to guide you. All right. So this is just a quick takeaway for folks. Matt, did you want to?
Yeah, I just, so when I speak with customers, one of the areas I like to begin the conversation around is just understanding, what drives your compliance, your risk, your security organizations, right? And so if your focus is, for example, looking along the left-hand side here, think about considering your scoping of what it is that you actually want to measure, right? So using the example of SOX compliance, I know that this is one that many of our spreadsheet-based customers who are kind of struggling to get out of that vicious cycle like to look at that and just say, if I could even just automate how I'm measuring the parts of SOX that are really causing the most pain for my business owners and are causing the most pain for my assessors and so forth. We'll just start by ring fencing those business applications that are relevant to SOX. Again, you might not have all the data, but your regulators and your external auditors are certainly going to tell you whether or not an application needs to be compliant with SOX. So if you know it is, ring fence it and start to put the right controls around it so that you can more effectively manage it. And I would sort of apply that logic of define what's most important, put a nice ring fence around it, and then go measure and take action against it. And that's really, this isn't meant to be overly exhaustive. It's meant really just to say, hey, if you're struggling to sort of understand, what do I all have in play out here, you could be forgiven, because there are a lot of different things that are driving risk and compliance in this current environment that we're operating in. But if you can even just figure out, right, what's your top 10? Heck, what's your top 3? You've already got a great place to start from to then inform how you want to take next steps.
Awesome. All right. So this is just a guide for folks to get started. And one thing I just wanted to call out here was when you're looking at the tables that you want to go, what we see customers use for their respective needs, whether they're financial or needing to comply with PCI or SOX. A lot of these are not necessarily infrastructure type records that they'll associate to their control objectives, right? So a lot of it is service related, ownership related, group related. So as long as your group data, sort of that foundational data is good, you should be able to get a very robust IRM program using ServiceNow.
Right. And I do think that's a great, you teed me up so well, Emery, to really, right, drive this point home of, yes, and I mentioned this earlier when we were talking about how IRM sort of grew up alongside the CMDB. Mm-hmm. We're also not unique in that respect within the suite of applications that ServiceNow provides, mm-hmm. right? And so as IRM has matured along the core sort of IT-centric pieces, as have many of our other areas, right? And that's where I overwhelmingly and resoundingly agree with this sentiment of like, it doesn't just have to be your IT assets, right? This can be, it can be anything by which you're currently capturing today, and where you have even a little bit of confidence in your data. Well, that's enough to get started, right? Mm-hmm. And if you take nothing away from this webinar, but what I'm about to say, take this away, which is enough to get started can lead you on a very long, fruitful path. Mm-hmm. Getting caught up in, do I have everything? Am I collectively exhaustive? Am I mutually exclusive? Am I this? Am I that? Am I that? You'll always find reasons to delay getting the value. And so, I really do just want to reiterate this whole idea of, don't be afraid of an MVP. Don't be afraid of starting with a subset of your processes and then looking at how can I mature them from there? How can I prioritize my backlog? Mm-hmm. Well, you can't get to a prioritized backlog until you first and foremost have something that you can put a backlog against. So get to value, get to using the application, and then figure out what's going to be most important next.
Yeah. And then, so Matt, a lot of times folks will have a parallel project going on at the same time to have their CMDB either going back to baseline or getting more accurate or just getting more healthy. How do you reconcile those two projects, IRM project and CMDB project going on at the same time? At some point, they're going to intersect, right? And so you're saying, let's get started with the MVP, but when we do have good data, how do we then pull those together?
So without going into too much depth on software development practices of, starting in your lowest environment and promoting up from there, I would say where you have those perceived choke points of where there's other work streams that may impact your time to value, mm-hmm. I would say, at risk of stating the obvious here, be collaborative and be communicative. Your platform owners are, first and foremost, most company platform owners want more use on the platform. So don't shy away from your core teams in understanding how they can help you as part of what they're working on, rather than how they might hold you up. But the second part of that is, also at risk of being obvious here, don't let great get in the way of good either. If you know that your CMDB team is working on a 6-month project to clean things up, then chart your course so that you can, perhaps use dummy data when you're developing and getting things ready. And then when you know that that's going to go live, just orchestrate your implementation and your go live so that you're achieving mutually beneficial outcomes. Because again, the really awesome benefit that you can achieve here too is if they were already doing the CMDB cleanup, and now as an added thing, they also are achieving positive outcomes in the governance, risk, compliance, IRM space, well, you're just building more allies that are going to help get behind how you want to drive your program forward. So to me, that's not a risk. That's an opportunity, right? That's a chance for you to have a seat at the table. That's a chance for you to be building relationships with your core team. That's a chance for you to build your relationships with your data owners, your data custodians, and the people that frankly are going to have to keep this stuff up long after an implementer like myself is gone.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then I was also saying that, I mean, that's a really good point. And then also once the CMDB or CIs, the infrastructure CIs are populated, whatever it is, those are things that matter to you. So those are things that you'll probably want to start bringing into your risk program, right? And then there's also indicators, right? So let's not forget about indicators. And that level of granularity might fit better, right, with the CIs. So as the CMDB gets more populated, with your networking things, your servers and all that infrastructure stuff, you may rather use indicators anyways than assign them to risks.
Yeah. And again, though, indicators for those who are unindoctrinated, it's just a fancy way of describing continuous monitoring. But you can't apply continuous monitoring to a process that you haven't first set up, right? And that's where I want to bring this back to. By identifying what's most important, by figuring out what either your external regulators or your internal management is prioritizing, you've now got a program that you can apply continuous monitoring to, that you can leverage indicators for, that you can start to look at, driving automated issue workflow so that when you do identify something, it's getting to the accountable person as quickly as possible. Those are all pipe dreams until you first and foremost plant a stake in the ground and you say, I need to manage and I need to measure that which is most important. That's the place where you want to start from. That's where you want to mature from. And you may find that once you get there, your priorities are going to change over time. And what you thought was really important maybe won't be the case. And the reason you thought that it was important was because, until you started getting some of the insights you're seeing from this collection of IT data, of personnel data, of office location data, of external regulatory data, you didn't really know what was actually throwing you off course anyway.
Yep. Good advice. All right. So let's go to the next question. Matt, if you were a director and just purchased ServiceNow, where would you start road mapping wise or product wise?
Yeah. So, excuse me. So first and foremost, I would focus on outcomes, right? What do you want to protect? How do you want to measure it? And who do you want to inform about those outcomes? I think starting from this place of we want to consume more licenses of IRM, probably not going to lead to the best outcomes. Or, we want to digitize something just to digitize something. I've seen customers fall into that snake pit before. And realistically, it never leads to sustainable results. If you design with outcomes in mind, you're going to not just make yourself happier with how much better you're working, but you're going to make your stakeholders and your management teams happier because they now have better information to then drive the next series of outcomes off of.
What does that mean?
However,
do you start with compliance or risk or audit?
Yeah. So many times the answers to these questions are going to depend on what kind of organization you are. I mentioned this earlier, but I think it bears mentioning again. Starting with risk, that could be the right solution for you. Starting with compliance, that could be the right issue. If your audit department's on fire, maybe you just start performing audits in ServiceNow because it's going to alleviate a tremendous amount of pain. Where to start is going to be a bit subjective. And so I don't want to sort of take like a firm and fast point of view on that because often the answer is rather nuanced. But what I will say is I would start with the content that's already available on the ServiceNow store to identify the regulations which best suit my needs. So as an example to that, today we have content packs that align to Sarbanes-Oxley. We have content packs that align to NIST 853. We have content packs that align with the Center for Internet Security benchmark, and they're just available to go download, right? And so if I'm someone who's already sort of feeling a bit overwhelmed by the breadth and the scope of like, how am I going to go about improving this, spreadsheet email smoke signal program that I'm having to operate or that I inherited, just use the content that we've already that's already there. Tried and true, vetted, because what that's going to give you is everything that's inclusive under that regulation, and then it's going to let you look at, okay, so of that, what's what do I really care about, right? If I'm looking at NIST and I'm in an industry where physical and environmental security is crucial to me, well, maybe I narrow down my scope to focus on that, right? Maybe right now, I'm a company who's dealing with some customer trust because of my internet boundaries that I'm defining for people to come in and use my applications and resources. Well, if that's the case, I'm probably going to start with the Center for Internet Security, and I'm going to focus on standing up a controls program that's going to help me defend the perimeter, right? And then in doing so, I'm going to get ancillary benefits vis-a-vis increases in consumer trust that can then go on to say, all right, well, now that I'm actually, I got controls, I'm measuring them, I know that I'm increasing my consumer trust and my regulatory trust. Well, how do I now think about scaling that, right? Because whatever benefit I've gained is probably not where I'm trying to get to. So then that's where the whole maturity mindset starts to come in.
And do you see? Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to sort of close that thought by mentioning, right, as well. So I know I'm talking a lot about information objects, talking a lot about what is happening in the external environment. But another area where we tend to see customers have pretty good information, and in my opinion only, I think it tends to be because the lawyers have to look at them before they get published. It's also policy information. So I generalize these concepts into regulations are what external parties tell me I need to do. Policy is what management and the board tells me I need to do. Well, if I know my external regulations are accurate, and by the way, I can get them for free on the content store, and I know that I have good policy standard compliance, that type of compliance data, because management's not going to accept that's out of date or inaccurate or not aligned to the vision and the goals of the company. Well, I can basically sort of marry those two together so that I have visibility into my internal priorities, my external obligations, and the things, again, overlying it with the CSDM idea is I also know what's most important and which I want to protect. Now I've got basically the run book for, the early goings of standing up an IRM program. So if I were coming in and somebody told me, hey, this isn't working, we need to have something that's going to be better, I would start there. With the the biggest thing I would sort of say, not the biggest thing, but with the idea in mind that this is also an approach that's going to take days and weeks to get to value rather than months and years. And I do think it would be I'd be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge that part is you're going to get to a production instance more quickly by leveraging that approach than you are by trying to document a litany of use cases and then trying to figure out how you can backdoor that process to make it work in ServiceNow. Seeing customers do it, sometimes they're successful, other times they're not. But one thing that is certain is those projects always take longer than when you're coloring within the lines on the coloring book.
That's true. So true. Awesome. All right. So you guys ready for a demo? Matt, you ready for the demo now?
Sure am.
All right.
Just one moment here. All right. So today we're just going to kind of spend a few minutes taking you through some of the concepts that we were talking about today. And I want to start by just introducing those who are unacquainted to the ServiceNow App Store. So you can get to the App Store if you're in your development environment by just going in and looking for applications, all available applications under systems. And from there, you'll see here, I've already gone ahead and selected what I'm interested in. So I went to the product family, governance, risk, and compliance, searched for content pack, and you'll see we've got GRC starter pack. We've got where did it go? Already off my talk track. So we can put in like CIS, and I can see. Why is that not? All right. Well, let's see. I'll just look for all of them. But what I can see here is when I come in and look at, so first of all, you'll see, number of different applications. You don't have to use everything all at once. However, point being here, so here's a cybersecurity controls accelerator. This is another one that you can come out. You'll see I've already got it installed. But these are all just meant to get you started with authority documentation, citation relationships, and basically get you to get templates of all the potential controls that you're going to want to leverage into the future. So for our demo today, I'm going to hop back over. And again, for those who haven't been into ServiceNow for a little while, pleased to show you our workspace views. So what I've got pulled up here is our compliance workspace. And then I've drilled down into the Center for Internet Security Controls version 7.1. Again, I clicked download. I came back a day later and I had all of this up for me, which is pretty cool. But specifically what you can look at here is, again, for somebody who's not overly familiarized, you can provide an overview, description. What am I looking at here? What am I not being compliant with? How are things breaking down? Now, this is a demo environment, so they're not all cleaned up. But what I did want to reference here is underneath this controls, you've got underneath this authority doc, you've got individual citations. So think of these as just the logical deconstruction of how something is narratively written in a authority document, basically broken down to be written as though it were a control. And what's super neat here is with these 191 citations, this also, you can drive this so that you're also automatically creating control objectives, which is a nice piece of automation that can alleviate some pain and time. But I don't want to get into too much of the solution. Instead, what I'd like to sort of show you is how you can think about, the little Zoom drop down thing is preventing me from seeing my screen. That's not one. There we go. So what I'd rather show you, though, is some of this idea of like how, once you've put in this idea of the underlying CSDM services, critical business applications, and so forth, once you've identified and defined that, once you've identified and defined what you want to measure, you've now got basically the ability to, within ServiceNow IRM, either laterally or vertically traverse each and every relevant area that you're going to want to drive insights from. So again, we're going to start from this idea. We're going to start from the control objective today, as this tends to be sort of the linkage point between my internal policies, my external regulations, and then what I want to measure them against vis-a-vis, data centers, things like that. And what you'll see is, data recovery capabilities. This is an important one, right? Particularly in the context of remote work, right? I go out to an industry conference and I lose my laptop, and on that laptop was stuff that I really couldn't afford to lose. How am I going to recover that data? Well, what's interesting is if we go down and we start to actually look at what is all associated with this record, you can see, well, I know that all of my critical business applications need to have data recovery capabilities, right? I can't just have my customer facing apps totally go unavailable. But what I can also look at from this view is that, again, it's going to look exactly like it looks up here, but I've also now able to tie back that not only is this a key thing from my own internal point of view, because these are affecting my critical business apps, but this is actually also something that I have a regulatory obligation to abide to. Furthermore, and I'll dive into this from the critical business applications, and this is where I get into this idea of you can actually traverse around the app. So if I click in here, I can see all right, I've got 25 entities associated with this, right? Think of entities as people, places, and things that you want to measure an outcome against. So I can see, for example, I've got things like my payment applications. I've got things like inventory management, so on and so forth. But I can also see that as part of my critical business applications, I've got content references, meaning I need to abide by CIS. I need to abide by the NIST cybersecurity framework. But I can also go in here and I can see that, and so that's my external environment. I can also see in my internal environment that I have an access standard that I need to abide by. I've got a remote access standard that I need to abide by. And then finally, this all sort of rolls up into this idea of, for all of my critical applications, what controls do I want to actually apply with them? So for today's example, we didn't do the full mapping because we didn't want to overwhelm you. But in effect, what workflow can help to drive and where you can really start to see a lot of the automation value that ServiceNow IRM provides is where you can take these 11 control objectives and the 25 entities that are going to be the most important to your business. And you now have a control hierarchy that you can begin to provide attestations to, that you can begin to schedule routinized, testing, evidence collection, so on and so forth. And this can be, and there's a lot of flexibility here, right? You can do this as a straight permutation. So take 25 times 11, and that's your control environment. Or you can actually get down into more detail and say, of these 25 entities, I know that, say, my payment applications need a different subset of controls than, say, my, critical IT services applications, right? They serve different purposes. They need different controls. Or you can take a look and say, these are all critical, therefore they all get the same controls. That's going to be up to you and your business and what your priorities are. But really the thing I want to show here is, once you've defined those elements that we were talking about earlier on in the webinar, actually getting those into a usable state in ServiceNow, it's marginal levels of effort. This is not a ERP implementation we're talking about. This is pretty quick time to value. And while it might not make everything perfect from the start, it's going to at least, the areas that were your pain points and no longer are your pain points, you're going to immediately notice those benefits. And the things that were pain points and are still pain points, you're probably going to feel them that much more. And it's going to make a really compelling business case for why you want to continue to expand your use on the platform, and in specifics, IRM. Because really what I'm showing you here is a very small portion of really where value can come from this product. But it is a piece that, to me, I see as being very fundamental. And once you get it right, there's a lot of other things that subsequently you start to make more and more sense, and you start to achieve that value in faster and faster fashion.
Awesome. And there's a related question in the Q&A, Matt, which they're asking, do you have an example of a company that has its whole CMDB linked to IT org chart, linked to its business process, linked to business products, linked to regulations that are both IT and business? So
I personally have not worked with a customer who has reached that level of maturity. I certainly think, that is the idealized state, right? Where you have everything sort of as an ecosystem, you're updating once in the system and you're sort of using it anywhere and everywhere you can think to augment value. Just the nature of ServiceNow as a product, most of our customers wet their beaks either from an asset management, an IT service management, or CMDB perspective. And so more often, IT risk, IT security, and IT compliance tends to be the leader. Business tends to be the lagger, but that's also changing. And so I think companies are beginning to understand that, IT was the point that necessitated automation most quickly. It was also, the parts of organizations that we're subject to more, outsourcing activities, subjected to, more, and this is just my opinion, but more of sort of like the knowledge drain, which then sort of drove the need to more systematically manage this. And I think what you're starting to see is more and more businesses are also rationalizing the portfolio of how they want to work, what applications they want to work in, and what skill sets are required on the business side. And so they're starting to now see that, as we're making that change, we have emerging risk. We have new areas that we need to comply with. And that's where I tend to see, again, like companies start with IT, and then they understand that a lot of IT problems are just business problems wrapped around an IT problem. And so they realize, oh, there's a lot that I can also do to drive this more. But to answer the specific question, not yet, but I think that there are, I certainly know of customers that are doing some really interesting leading edge type stuff. And so it's not for a lack of like the software's ability to do it or a customer to achieve it, but rather, many of our very leading edge customers are looking both at breadth of what they're measuring, but they're also looking at like next level leading edge sort of thought leadership type activities and how ServiceNow can help them adopt that as well.
Right. Just because folks are trying to do more with less these days, right? So take advantage of the platform automation, AI, and that sort of thing. So some of those are actually going to be featured by Blurta in really short segments monthly throughout the year. So that's just something to know. And then the other question is, would, in your opinion, ServiceNow IRM be able to accommodate all those links from the CMDB to business regulation? So to authority documents. So we talk about all those linkages, right? That big colorful picture. Does ServiceNow accommodate all that?
So the short answer is yes, it accommodates it.
Yeah.
The longer answer is, and I'll speak from my own experience rather than towing too hard of a company line here, but what I've experienced working with customers is while they can do that, usually they don't want it to, just because the volume that it tends to create. So the focus tends to be less on, can you ingest all of those IT sources and then relate them back? And it tends to be more, which of those sources do I want to associate back so that I don't end up with, tens of thousands of controls, but rather, hundreds of controls, but those hundreds of controls are the things that are really the most important and the most impactful.
Awesome. Yeah. So back to the coloring book analogy, all the linkages are there in guiding you to color it with your data, your regulations, your processes, and you can grow with the platform.
That's right. My daughter has a coloring book and I have a coloring book. You can be either.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So I think that's it. Just wanted to start to wrap things up with a couple key takeaways. Matt?
Yeah.
So sum it all up.
All right. So key takeaways. I don't want to read off the page, but I will sort of summarize by saying some of the key points that we've talked about throughout. So don't let great get in the way of good. Your CMDB doesn't have to be perfect. The most important thing is that the data that you care most about, the information objects that you best want to protect, that you can rely and trust that data.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah. From there, focus on those things that are most critical to you. If you're an organization that right now, if your big focus is top line growth, try to stand up a compliance program or a risk program that supports top line growth. If you're working for an organization and it's as much about just keeping the competitors at bay, consider taking an approach that's gonna help you achieve that outcome, right? Don't see this as a check the box activity. Don't see this as just another way to get out a spreadsheet. See this as a way to sort of transform the way that you work and to really drive accountability to the right parts of the organization and provide visibility into the key parts of the organization. Third, use what's already available in ServiceNow. Align what's already in ServiceNow to our CSDM. This is going to continue to help you. That isn't to say integrations are a boogeyman. Integrations can also be a great way. I know we didn't talk about it a lot here, but that's another one that once you kind of get your program off the ground, you can also start to look at, where else do I want to be ingesting data and where do I want to send it within ServiceNow? for anybody who's in a security organization out there, there's certainly a tremendous amount of opportunity here as it relates to vulnerability results. Are you the type of person who's struggling to get through the mountains and mountains and mountains of high severity issues and even understand if they're real or not? ServiceNow can help you with that. You may not want to start with that as a use case, just because, again, we're sort of the premise of, build it on a strong foundation and then scalability comes more naturally. But point being here, use what's already there, but don't be afraid of what else is out there, because ServiceNow is also built to take on that data and to do it in a way that's not going to incur, tremendous amounts of tech debt and hamstring you into the future. Use CSDM. This is a somewhat new concept that ServiceNow has come out with, or a solution that we've wrapped, but this has really been at the center and the premise of our organization for a very long time. Use the data model to populate the data as it's intended to be used. It can sometimes feel like we're all special snowflakes, and in many respects we are all special snowflakes, but we have designed this product with the idea in mind that we want to impact value to as wide a breadth of customers as possible. We have not designed this to be a bespoke solution with a certain industry or a certain IRM vertical in mind. We have built this to suit the needs of a multitude of organizations. So if you feel like CSDM doesn't work for you, I would encourage you to sort of challenge yourself, challenge your management, challenge your stakeholders, and really ask yourself why your program is in a place where you are going to struggle to take on what are principally like good platform usage habits.
Yep.
And then lastly, use accelerators. We have things out on the ServiceNow store. We have partners out in the ecosystem that have some very interesting opportunities that they can provide. But understand that ServiceNow already has data that's available to you. You already have data that's available to you. Use it to jumpstart your program. Don't see it as a cheat code. Just see it as a necessity to keep up with the fast pace that your business is changing at. Because frankly, if you're going to try to stand this all up with a blank spreadsheet where you start to key this stuff in, it's going to be a tough go.
Yeah.
So if there's information that you can leverage, do it.
All right. Couple questions. Okay, we got two questions in chat. How are fields positioned in the UI? Is it top down, then left to right, or left to right, then top down? And that's more of a platform question.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you the most ServiceNow answer you've ever heard. It can be either. Our platform has a lot of flexibility, and UI is often one of the areas where when we talk about configuration versus customization, we tend to try to keep folks into, if you're going to change the way that fields look on a form, do it in a way that's not going to impact your future. But out of the box as a standard, they tend to read top to bottom, left to right. But in essence, right, in reality, what you have is on most ServiceNow forms, you're going to have the key content to the form. You're going to have any linkages out to other places, and then you're going to have related lists. And related lists are that's the secret sauce.
Yeah,
that's what enables you, right? So, and that will read left to right. Right. So I wouldn't think of it in that context. I think of it more as just whomever you're working with to get your program going. Just keep in mind that you don't want to make any changes on the form that's going to impact you in the future. Yeah. Beyond that, you've got a lot of flexibility.
Awesome. Yes, there is a lot of flexibility. So there is another question, which is, what would a bad jumpstart look like? Let's save that for office hours, or try to answer that offline, because that's actually probably a really good question to start with. So just wanted to wrap things up. We do have office hours next Tuesday from 9 to 9:30. Just to follow up this session, we can talk live. It's not a recorded session, so hope to see some of you guys there if you have any questions. Also, Aisha has put in the chat all the links to how to register for our upcoming webinars. We've got some exciting stuff coming up, and here are the QR codes so that you guys can go ahead and get registered or take a look at our GRC YouTube playlist to look at some of the functionality. So And just last words, thank you all for joining us today and hope to see you soon in a future event.
Thanks so much, Anne-Marie, and thank you to everybody who made the time to come today. Your time is truly appreciated. Thank you all and take care.
Thank you.